Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Emory Climate Talks. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental sciences at Emory University. We continue hearing sad news all over the world about the explosion in Lebanon, the oil spill in Mauritius, and the Canadian ice shelf bigger than Manhattan collapsing in the Arctic. Climate change is happening now, and it seems all the more urgent that we work towards solutions as we fight the existing pandemic, racial injustice, and the economic crisis we are facing right now. I'm so glad to have you all with us for that today. The webinar series is made possible by our anonymous donor that supports our trip to the UN climate change negotiations, and Emory Climate Talks is in partnership with the Department of Environmental Sciences and the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. I would like to give a special thanks to Leah Thomas, who does everything behind the scenes. She even set up the stage when she is on vacation, so I really am thankful for that. And of course, again, I really want to thank you all for tuning in today. We have so many great speakers coming up as well, and so please check out our website. And the easiest thing to do would be to use this QR code that you're seeing on the flyer. It will take you to climatetalks.emorydomains.org/webinars, where you can find all the information you need for our future webinars. This Thursday, we are working together with Goizueta Energy and Environment Group to host Denise Magwib from Marriott International. Next Monday, we will have our Emory alumna, Vicky Arroyo, come talk on climate policy and about the recent Equitable Adaptation Legal and Policy Toolkit. For the past talks, which we now have 12 of, please also check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. You will see how to subscribe from our main website. We are recording today's talk, as you might have noticed, and we will make that available to you in the next couple of days on the YouTube channel as well. For the recording purposes, we have muted your microphone, but if you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to use the chat function to type up the questions so that we can raise them during the Q&A session. Today, I'm so delighted to have with us Mr. James Marlow, the CEO and founder of Clean Energy Advisors. I'm sure he will tell us all things about it, but Clean Energy Advisors was founded in 2019 in Atlanta and provides strategic planning and consulting services for solar, energy storage, clean tech, sustainability, and digital transformation initiatives. Mr. Marlow has graduated from Georgia Southern University and has completed the Georgia Tech Mid-Career Management Program. He's an innovator, business builder, technology marketer, digital transformation leader in computing, digital and clean energy technologies. He has worked with Computerland, Lotus Development, IBM, and Yahoo, and was the founder of 2 startups, internet startup AnythingSouthern.com, and CEO and co-founder of Radiance Solar. Mr. Marlow was also a candidate for United States Congress in the 10th District of Georgia. He has worked directly in the development, engineering, design, construction, and operations and maintenance of over 350 solar PV and energy storage projects at every scale. He served on the board of directors for the Georgia Solar Energy Industry Association, Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Energy and Environment Committee, and has been a founding board member and vice chairman of the Georgia Solar Energy Association. He's also a founding board member of the Technology Association of Georgia Smart Energy Society and the Metro Atlanta Chamber Clean Tech Leadership Council. He's also a past board member of the Environment Fund for Georgia, Earthshare, and the Savannah Riverkeeper. Mr. Marlow will tell us all about our journey to the clean energy economy today, and I'm so excited about that. With that, thank you so much, James, for joining us, and the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with you today. I appreciate that kind introduction and you allowing me to be a guest today. I'm going to give about a 20, 25, 30-minute talk, and then hopefully we're going to have some good questions and discussion. I've got a fairly broad agenda for that amount of time. I'm going to hopefully tell you some solar basics and some energy storage basics and kind of, maybe give a broad basic 101 of solar. I'm also going to try to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the policy frameworks, both the federal, international, state, local policy barriers, challenges, that we have, and then share with you just some things I think you need to be thinking about as Emory students today. So hopefully you'll get something out of this and we'll have a good dialogue. At this point, I'm going to dive right in by sharing my screen. Please confirm you can see that okay.
Yes, we can see well.
All right, thank you. So my current thesis right now is that we're not going back to normal. So if you've been following this daily as I have, and I'm sure you have, some of the best writing I've seen on this is from McKinsey. And if you haven't signed up or looked at some of their essays, they talk about the Great Reset, the next normal, the Great Acceleration. I've got other friends that are talking about the Great Reflection, the Trump Depression. Obviously, climate is of a similar magnitude and scale of what we're dealing with right now. So what I'm calling this, in my word, building on the McKinsey phrase, is the next normals, because it's not going to be normal. Even when something looks normal on the surface, I don't think it's going to be normal underneath. And energy is a pretty big part of that. So I read this quote last week. This gentleman was a venture capitalist, and he said, people ask him all the time, what is the next big thing? And they always expect him to say, well, it's going to be robotics or AI or quantum computing. And he says that the next thing is really the end of the industrial age. So I'm going to paraphrase that and call it the death of the industrial age. And this transformation is going to be painful and messy. It's not going to be easy for the incumbent industries. The fossil fuel industries aren't going to calmly go into this with a big smile on their face. They're going to be losing a guaranteed revenue stream of billions and billions, and they're going to fight it. So it's going to be messy, so hold on tight. My friend Bill Nussey talks about this transition as being the greatest opportunity for wealth creation in history. And I think that's true, and I look forward to the oil companies like Royal Dutch Shell and BP that are now doing this, the energy companies like Southern Company, embracing this as opposed to fighting it. But there's a big opportunity, and I think we're going to get there. So this pace of change is really accelerating. And you know, the iPhone is really only 12 years old, and it's really a supercomputer in your pocket. And it's been a pretty transformational device and platform. But when you look at, you know, kind of everything that's happening in that acceleration of technology, the phrase I use for it is permanent whitewater. So there's always going to be a lot of heavy paddling, and just when you think you're going to get out of one big rapid, you're going to go right into another one. So, I mean, as we started the year alone, you know, we've seen a global pandemic, a health crisis, a mental health crisis, a drug and alcohol crisis underneath that. We've seen an economic crisis. We see gross inequity that's just breaking. We've seen racism. We've seen all these challenges, and the year is only half over. So, you know, all of these technologies that we're looking at right now are coming at us all at the same time. You know, this isn't happening in a vacuum. These 20 challenges I saw in a summary this week were pretty good. Adrian Book wrote this essay about all the different technologies here. A lot of those are coming together in the clean energy economy. Graphene, energy storage, you know, better computing, all those things are playing a role in solar. Even drones, we use drones quite commonly now, and they're low cost, and the use of that technology helps us in construction and monitoring, and actually a lot of these technologies that aren't necessarily directly energy related are being used in energy. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a background on some solar basics. In Georgia, there are, according to the Solar Energy Industries Association, 4,798 solar workers. And that doesn't include energy storage workers, and it's people in the field, like these colleagues of mine installing a solar project in a field. They could be at Hanwha Q Cells in Dalton, Georgia, manufacturing solar panels. They could be at SK Battery when that plant is completed, creating energy storage devices to go in Volkswagens and other cars. The first thing I always like to communicate about solar is that in energy, it's more complicated than you want it to be. And it requires a lot of different things because it's a regulated industry, so it's different in every state. It's different for every utility, so the programs can be different. Everything keys off the energy rate, and that's based on a kilowatt. So you need to understand what a kilowatt is, what a kilowatt hour is, and really kind of understand what a peaking resource is, like solar, what a base load generating resource like nuclear is, because they all have a role to play. It's really important to know that what drives solar is really two things. Solar policy, the regulatory framework, but more importantly, the economic cost compression and the price drops. Solar has dropped about 80% in cost over the last 10 years. So this low-cost solar is what's driving solar jobs, solar projects, the adoption of clean energy, and it's a very low maintenance technology. It's not a no maintenance technology, but it is very low maintenance. So, you know, these are some of the key drivers. The tax credit and tax policy is a part of that, the utility programs. You know, a lot of times we talk about a megawatt. What does that really mean? A megawatt solar plant would be about $1 million, about 5 acres of land, and would power about 220 homes. So I'll show you some pictures of those so you'll get a little understanding of it. Georgia is a leader in solar. We're a top 10 state in very large scale solar. You might not see much solar in Georgia, but if you went across South Georgia, you would see these giant solar farms that take up even 1,000 acres, which would be like Hartsfield-Jackson Airport is about 1,000 acres. So imagine Hartsfield-Jackson completely covered up in solar panels, and there are big solar farms in South Georgia that look like that. Now, we are behind in distributed generation, so solar on your home or business or school. Emory's getting a little more solar right now. That's a great thing. Ideally, we should have about 80% of our energy at utility scale and about 20% on top of roofs, on top of parking decks, on top of parking lots. A big example of a success of solar in Georgia, Facebook moved to Georgia. They said, we're going to build $1 billion energy data campus, and we want 400 megawatts of solar energy to power it. And they've now increased that to 600 megawatts. So one of the largest energy deals in our state history involves solar energy in Walton EMC. Georgia Power has built solar at almost all of our Department of Defense bases. So all our military bases have solar power. Eventually they'll add energy storage. Solar has been great for rural Georgia. The property taxes, the construction jobs on these have been very, very helpful for a lot of very poor rural counties, which need investment very much. Solar's been great for our utilities. Southern Company is the #2 owner of solar in North America behind NextEra, and they've got billions invested and in power purchase agreements for billions of dollars. Our EMCs in the state are also a leader. So Cobb EMC, Walton EMC, Green Power, they've been some real leaders, and I appreciate what they've done. So some of the basics on solar, I mean, how does it work? I mean, you have essentially 5 components. You have a solar panel, which has no moving parts. They're primarily made of silicon. They have glass on top of them. They typically have an aluminum frame. There are some that are made out of products like First Solar that have cadmium telluride, but most of them are made out of silicon, and they're very, very stable devices that don't have any moving parts. You then have an inverter. An inverter will convert DC power, which is made in the solar cell and the solar panel, into AC, which will then go into the meter and go into the electric grid or run your home. I'm talking to you from a home that's solar powered, so it's a beautiful sunny day. So this computer that I'm running is being powered by solar energy. I took a shower this morning with solar hot water. So, you know, using these technologies in our day-to-day work. And then the 5th component of this would be a monitor, so we could see the production of this energy and see if there's a problem and get an alert if the system is not working properly. So those are some very basic things that I think everybody should know about solar. This is what some of these big solar projects look like. They're ground mounted. Many of them are fixed, meaning they don't move, and a lot of them are now trackers. So they track the sun during the day, so they get about 20% more energy production because they're able to track and get a better instant angle and get more energy production. They can be on the roof. I'm sure many of you have probably shopped at Ikea. I like shopping at Ikea. The roof of the Ikea at Atlantic Station is about 1 megawatt of solar. I helped install those solar panels. You see manufacturing plants like Shaw Carpet or Wilson Art at Georgia Tech. The Clough Center was one of the first big projects I was involved with. Anheuser-Busch and Cartersville, we helped them install solar there. This was one of the first 20 megawatt plants east of the Mississippi. This is down in Camilla, Georgia. So that project is 120 acres of solar panels. Once again, there are projects that have over 1,000 acres of solar panels, and that's really kind of solar as far as the eye can see. So this was originally land growing peanuts and was at a substation, so it was low-cost land. It was adjacent to Georgia Power, and Origis built this project. Radiance Solar did the engineering, design, procurement for it. If you ever go over to Mercedes-Benz Atlanta Falcon Stadium, there's a solar parking canopy over there, and you can see what solar parking lots look like. If you're over by Agnes Scott, they have a parking deck with a similar array on top of it. Cherry Street is working to build some projects on Emory's campus right now. A little bit better, bigger picture of the Ikea rooftop. So that's kind of what 1 megawatt of solar looks like on a rooftop. This is at the University of Georgia. This is a project I was particularly proud of. It's a research and development project. So you see a tracking array to the right. You see fixed arrays at different angles, and you see some dual axis trackers in the background. They actually track on dual axes. They work very well, but they're just very expensive to build and not really very economic based on our energy cost. But this is an example of solar, kind of different configurations and different types on a single site. This is one of my favorite projects. This was built by Radiance Solar with Cherry Street and Georgia Power on Jekyll Island, one of my favorite places. And we built it on a landfill. So we took distressed land, we took non-productive land, and we made it into a bright field. So we took something that was unproductive and made it productive. Hopefully, ultimately, they'll add energy storage to this, but you can see the Atlantic Ocean and the marshes of Glen there in the background. This is an example of floating solar. So if you had a water treatment plant or some non-productive land, you could use floating solar. This is an example of a residential solar project up in North Georgia. This is an example of some energy storage components. So you see at the bottom left, the Tesla Powerwall, which I'm sure you've all heard of. But the top image is of a power pack or mega pack from Tesla. So if you were doing it at a utility scale, another company that makes a Powerwall-like device is Sonnen. They have a headquarters here in Atlanta. They're a European company, but their North American headquarters is in Atlanta. Energy storage, think of it a little bit like a hard drive for your computer. So it'll be a very routine component of solar. Right now, for residential solar installations in California or Georgia, about 65% of the residential installations now have energy storage. So energy storage is coming on very quickly. As the prices continue to decline, it will be much more common. Let's talk just for a second about energy mix. A lot of people don't know where their energy comes from. Americans seem to have a willful ignorance about where our energy comes from, where our water comes from, or even where our food comes from. I like to know where my food comes from. I like to know where it's grown. I like to know where my water supply is. But our energy mix in Georgia has changed pretty drastically since 2010. I started in the solar industry in 2007, and there was really almost no solar in Georgia. There was a little bit of off-grid mountain house solar in North Georgia, but there was very little solar in Georgia. There was essentially no commercial installations. And now Georgia Power, in their embrace of solar in 2023, solar will be equal to nuclear. And the more current version of this slide actually shows at 2025, 20% of Georgia Power's energy mix will be solar energy. And I applaud their efforts for that. They've done a lot of great work there, and I applaud it. I do want them to do more with distributed generation. I want them to do more with electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. But I applaud what they've done. They've been a leader in this, and you know, that's a pretty drastic change in a utility world. And I hope you kind of get a mix of what that means, but solar is becoming more and more a commonplace source of energy. And we'll talk a little bit about Biden, but Biden has a goal of the United States being 100% clean energy by 2035. 14 states have clean energy goals. They typically range from 2035 to 2050. But not many people know that. So Virginia was the most recent state to set a goal of being 100% clean energy. And, you know, I do think Vice President Biden's goal of doing 100% clean energy by 35 is the right date. You really can't do it any sooner. I mean, as a person that has built a lot of these things, understands the building of it, it's going to take some time to get it in. It's going to take a sense of urgency, and it's going to take the $2 trillion and more that he's pledged. So let's talk a little bit about the future in Georgia and how that relates to the bigger world. But, you know, Georgia is a leader in clean tech. We could be a much bigger leader if we had a little more leadership around it. And that's really part of decarbonization and digitization. Being net zero energy or near net zero energy is a phrase I like to use, so that if your home didn't require very much energy and you had a little solar energy on it, we could have a much less impactful living environment, creating zero carbon buildings, using electric transport. And that's really important to distinguish not just personal electric vehicles, but think about those UPS trucks being electric. Those, you know, Amazon has 100,000 Rivian electric vehicles on order. So some really, really cool things are happening that autonomous electric vehicles, EV to grid, plugging your car in. And if there's a hurricane event, the power goes off, your car could power your house. Solar shingles, solar glass. There's just some really cool things going on in the technology. Let me pause for a moment and shift and talk a little bit about policy. You've really kind of got international policy and supply chains. Solar is a very, very global business, very global. Global supply chains. I mean, solar cells might be made on one continent. They might be assembled into modules, like in Dalton, Georgia, then shipped all over the world. I mean, it's very, very global. Inverters, very global business. We have tariff wars going on right now. The Trump tariffs have been a very bad policy. I couldn't be more negative to those policies. They're designed to slow solar. They're not designed to do anything else but slow solar. And the way a tariff works is the buyer of that good pays the tariff. The Chinese don't pay the tariffs. The buyer of the good pays the tariff, and it goes to the US Treasury. So the solar tariffs, the aluminum tariffs, the steel tariffs, all been very negative to solar. So a definite headwind on the solar industry. People in the solar industry will often talk about the solar coaster. There are a lot of ups and downs in our industry's development, and these tariffs have been a good example of headwinds and challenges in that. They created a great deal of uncertainty, and that uncertainty slowed down projects. It caused people to, you know, delay projects, cancel projects, and soften the support for our energy industry for a while. So, you know, federal policy matters a lot. You have federal tax credits that drive the solar industry. You have the ability to turn that tax credit into a grant, which would help create jobs in the Great Depression that we're entering right now. There are state policy barriers. In Georgia, we have a lot of barriers to distributed generation. There are even limits to the size systems you can do. There are a lot of things in the state issues that are very limiting to solar. My view is I'm an American. If I choose to use a technology on my home or business, that I have the freedom to do that. So it is a property rights argument. It is a way to save money. It is a way to reduce your environmental impact. And we've got some state policies that prohibit that. There are even local policies that prohibit it. So there could be zoning restrictions. There could be HOA, homeowners association, covenants that will limit you from putting solar on your home. And in the policy framework, you know, we have outright enemies and we have frenemies. So, you know, utilities will be frenemies of the solar industry from now on. I have very, very good friends in the utility industry, and I have people that I know think that I should just stay out of their business, and that what I do is wrong, and it's really kind of a funny thing to watch sometime. But there are enemies to solar. There are people that go out and create FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. In Georgia recently, there's a group promoting that you can't recycle solar panels. And they're not a group that cares about recycling anything. They're just trying to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt to question somebody doing a solar project. So, people use strange strategies or tactics. The utilities now say that people shouldn't put solar on their homes because rich people putting solar on their homes is going to drive up rates for poor people, elderly people, or people of minority status. So that's factually wrong, but it's a talking point they use. They use it very successfully, as a matter of fact. But the reality is adding more solar is driving down energy costs for everybody. It is reducing environmental impact, and it is a tool in our fight against climate change. So now I'm going to share just some random things that I thought you'd find interesting. I'm a fan of Dalio. Ray Dalio has a book called Principles. I'll share a little graph from that I find very interesting. One of my favorite books is a book about scenario planning written by Peter Schwartz called The Art of the Long View. I highly recommend that if you like to read as I do. And they worked at Royal Dutch Shell, and they were making very long-term decisions for billion-dollar oil platforms. So they had to create a mindset and a tool set and a framework to build scenarios. McKinsey does that very well today. I think if you would give that book a few minutes, or even study the Wikipedia page, I think you'd find it really valuable. This year, I've been spending a lot of time thinking a lot more about ecosystems and transdisciplinary work. I read Dr. Odom's book on ecology, the Odom School of Ecology at the University of Georgia, but thinking about the big picture. It's not just about technology. It's not just about policy. It's not just about business. It's about the whole ecosystem. And I think the better we think about ecosystems and a transdisciplinary mindset, the better off we're going to be. I do a lot of work at tech, and tech tends to be very siloed in their thinking. Electrical engineering does one thing. You've got people that do energy doing other things. You've got people doing computing. But when we bring it all together, that's when we really see the breakthroughs. We see real innovation when you bring those different ideas together. The last concept I'd like for you to think about is, I learned something a few weeks ago. A good friend of mine and I were talking about kind of the state of the world. And he used this phrase that what happened is business shifted from optimizing their businesses to maximizing profits. And we've done that at great pain. And that we have supply chains where 90% of America's drugs are now made in China. We have supply chains that are very fragile and thin, and we've seen them break during COVID because we can't get materials across the oceans quickly enough. We can't organize, and that we need to think more about optimizing for business versus maximizing profits. And then that really gets into kind of stakeholders versus shareholders and conscious capitalism. So if you don't know the phrase conscious capitalism, I'm a conscious capitalist. I believe in capitalism. It's the most efficient business system that we have. But hyper-capitalism takes advantage of workers. It doesn't have a regard for the environment. And conscious capitalism really takes into account all those things and tries to build a good, profitable business, tries to take care of employees and shareholders and stakeholders alike. And it also takes into account the waste that they may create. But those are four things that I'd like for y'all to be thinking about and take a look at, and some things I've learned a lot about. So Dalio says this is the way the world works. In business, we worship the curve, that upward sloping curve. We love to see profits going up and growth. But what Dalio says is the way it really works is you have a great plan, you plan for success, and then you have the headwind. Or in the case of solar, you have tariffs, or you have COVID, or you have supply chain disruptions. So then you have learnings, and then you regroup. And so this spiral is the way it really works. And this has really helped me understand a lot about the way business planning works. You're going to have budget cuts. The state of Georgia right now is going through major budget cuts. So every state school, Georgia Tech, they're going through planning for that. So building scenarios using this model of failures and disruption and then regrouping. Those are some tools that I found very helpful. They're very simple tools, but they're very, very powerful. The last topics I have is one of the things I'm involved in right now is I'm helping launch the Georgia group for clean energy for Biden. And I believe very strongly that we should elect Biden as president of the United States. I want to stand up and be counted. I don't want anybody to be ambiguous about what I think of the current leadership of our lack of leadership of our country. And I think Vice President Biden is a decent human being, and he's been a great supporter of solar energy in the past. And he's very recently announced this goal of clean energy by 2035, and $2 trillion over 4 years to help us get there. So it's a way to create jobs, economic development, and also transition us to this clean energy. So we've got a fundraiser with Jigger Shaw, my good friend. If you don't know who Jigger is, you ought to know who Jigger is. He's one of the top 100 global leaders in clean energy and climate, and a great guy. We're going to have some other activities. So go to Biden for Clean Energy for Biden and sign up and get the updates and join us and help us. So some other resources that I'll mention that you might find interesting, and I'll do a quick time check. I'm a little bit over, but I have found Tony Seba, who's a Stanford disruption scholar. You can Google a couple of his lectures where he says that electric vehicles, solar, energy storage, self-driving vehicles are going to change the world, and they're inevitable. It's just a matter of time before the economics reach a certain point. The R&D necessary to make those happen. He has a really, really good summary of a lot of important things. So The Energy Gang is a podcast with Jigger Shaw and Catherine. The Rocky Mountain Institute, they're some of the smartest people I know, great thought leaders on energy. If you want to learn about energy, sign up for their emails. The Solar Energy Industry Association does some fantastic work. I'm a proud supporter of SEIA. Just about every day I read Solar Wake Up, which is a free email with Jan. Jan does a great summary. So if I could only just read like one solar email for updates and news, Solar Wake Up would be something I'd recommend you do. Green Tech Media does some really great work. Woods Mackenzie owns them. They do the premier research on solar. So if I only had a couple of sites, those would be a couple. And as I said earlier, the McKinsey writing on the next normal, the Great Reset, highly recommend it. Really, really good stuff. No cost. Great for students. So my last item and last slide is a call to action, a call to arms. I want you guys to act. I want you to do things. I want you to get involved in a campaign. I want you to get involved in a project, support a group, act. This is not about reading about it. It's about getting out there. And in my work in philanthropy and nonprofit work, I always get a lot more out of it than I actually put into it. And I learn and grow and meet some great people. So my call to action to you is do something. Pick something, even as a student, to get involved in, to participate in, and learn and grow within.
Great. Thank you so much, James. On behalf of everybody, I would like to clap. And then anybody that wants to ask questions, please use the chat function to do that. I already have one question. So Lois asks, you mentioned that federal policies and economic incentives are two key drivers that propel the solar energy sector forward in the US. Do you see this equation changing significantly given the state of the US and the rest of the world? If so, how? If not, why do you think that solar energy companies will continue to play a big role?
Well, I tell people all the time, there's only one thing that I'm really, am I sharing my screen right now?
No, you're not.
Do you see me? Okay. There's only one thing I'm sure of. There's going to be a lot more solar. The rate of adoption of that solar is unknown. The velocity at which we install more solar could be slowed down by the re-election of Trump or sped up drastically in a tailwind with the support of Biden. Throughout this year, it's been really interesting. Pre-COVID, there was a major announcement, commercial announcement, almost every day starting with BlackRock, which manages $7 trillion. And BlackRock said, we're no longer going to invest in companies that use fossil fuels. And so Vanguard and Goldman Sachs and other major investors, they've changed their position. And so as a result of that, you've seen Southern Company, which was 70% coal not long ago, saying they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. And that's done because those institutional investors have basically required it. But you've also seen PepsiCo and Visa say we're going to be 100% renewable energy. And those are very mainstream companies. They're not Facebook and Google. They're not big tech, which has lots of money to do anything they want. You've also seen BP and Royal Dutch Shell saying we're going to reorganize our complete industry. And right now there is an oil war going on. You don't hear much about that, but Saudi Arabia and Russia are really trying to bankrupt the American oil business. And it's in a very chaotic state, but people aren't really talking about it because all the other things going on.
So you mentioned about how the energy distribution, the contribution of renewable energy has changed in 2010 to now. I was wondering what is really driving that? It seems to me that the Georgia state policy is not advancing so much in terms of renewable energy. So what was the major force of that change?
The major force are economics. So the cost of solar dropping to the point that it's the lowest cost form of new energy. And then there's no fuel risk. So essentially you're buying a plant. In Colorado, they're able to build new solar plants cheaper than the cost of operating coal plants. So the economics are the driver. The number two driver is policy, because policy can slow it down. Policy can create barriers to creating a level playing field.
So Mindy asks, as you mentioned, utility scale solar installations can be incredibly large and thus have incredibly large land impacts. Can you talk a little about the importance of smart siting of solar and tensions that can arise within the environmental community between solar expansion and wildlife forest prime agricultural land protection?
Yes, thanks, Mindy. How are you today? I'm a all of the above solar person. I want to see large scale solar. I want to see it intelligently sited with good land use and good wildlife impacts taken into account. In Georgia right now, I'm a very vocal critic of the high percentage of solar that we do in these large fields. There needs to be 80% of our solar should be in those large fields. There should be good planning policies to protect habitat, to protect the gopher tortoise, which is a keystone species, which a lot of other animals use their burrows, the indigo snake, for example, to protect wetlands areas. You can design these sites unlike a traditional energy plant where you just basically concrete everything. You can even have nature paths and trails and wetland areas within a solar plant. So we have the ability to intelligently site this and have a minor impact. But there's a lot of land in Georgia. If you've ever driven across Georgia, it's a very large state, and there's a lot of land. Examples of doing that correctly to me would be taking advantage of brownfields, like the example on Jekyll Island, using rooftop floating, using parking canopies. I mean, there are miles and miles and miles and miles of asphalt parking lots in front of businesses of all types. We can put solar over that and provide shade for the guests. We can put them on top of parking decks. I mean, there are a lot of things we can do to more intelligently site solar. When you actually spread it out more, you actually create more resiliency. Unfortunately, right now, all those solar projects in Southwest Georgia are under a single weather pattern. And so they've been impacted by hurricane events, and they've also been impacted by tornadic activity. If we had distributed generation all across our state, and the way I usually say it is solar everywhere for everyone. So we want everyone at every income level to participate in clean energy, but we do want to spread it out so we get the advantages and savings of distributed generation. We even save energy by doing that. when you transmit energy over long transmission lines, you typically lose 4 to 6% of that energy. So spreading it out, putting it near the site, like the solar panels on top of my roof, you're able to get that savings in transmission and distribution cost and equipment, and also switch gear and other benefits.
I guess related to the solar panels, you were mentioning a little bit about recycling. Can you say a little bit more about that? Is it possible to be recycled? Is that something that we should be worried about if we are going to have a lot more of? And also, I've heard that it takes a lot of water resources to clean. Is that true?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. It doesn't take a lot of water resources. So very, very small amount of water to wash solar panels. Most solar panels are positioned at greater than 10 degrees, even on a roof, and they have a self-cleaning property. So even if you do go wash a large solar field, you're not going to use a lot of water. So that's a myth. That's FUD. That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The recycling, we do need to create an industry to recycle solar panels. Most solar panels are less than 10 years old, and they have a 25-year design life or longer. You may have some panels that are going to last 30, 35 years. I usually say 20 to 25 years because, like computers, you're going to get to a point where you want to upgrade to newer panels. And the recycling of silicon, of aluminum, of glass, of copper wire, of aluminum wire, of steel for racking, aluminum for racking, those materials are all recyclable. But the people talking mostly about recycling are our enemies trying to slow things down. Because they're not talking about recycling anything else. They're not talking about recycling. They're creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Solar panels can easily be recycled, and that will be factored in. It will be much cheaper to do that, and essentially you'll have a mobile facility that will go out and process the materials and then transport it at low cost. That hasn't really happened yet, but it is happening. It's happened much more in Europe, which has more requirements around that for the end of life. But that is not a major issue. It is something that we need to address. It's very important to me that we don't landfill those materials. I mean, I'm an environmentalist. I prefer the term conservationist. Conserving materials to me is just a practical value, and we can easily do that.
So in your mind, should it be, okay, there's another, so I will go to ask Brendan's question first before I ask mine again. From your experience working with startups, how difficult is it to scale up for a company in the solar industry? Do these startups mainly get leverage from government subsidies or private investment or a mix? Is it getting easier to receive funding as a solar startup as the field is getting more attention?
Well, I would say it's like any startup. 90% of all startups fail. A lot of people read, and I love reading business writing, Fast Company or Inc. magazine. They love to tell the story of the really smart people that have coffee and they have a great idea on a napkin, and 6 months later they're a billionaire. That doesn't happen very often. It does happen, but it doesn't happen very often. Probably a similar statistic to people that become stars in Hollywood. Most people start businesses and work very hard for a very long time. And, it's mainly done almost exclusively through private investment. There are tax credits for the solar projects themselves. And there are some Department of Energy grants for specific things to help people start and create new technologies. I participated in some of those. But the majority of the startup capital for solar companies is by individuals, entrepreneurs, venture capital, and it is not a grant-based or subsidy-based thing. So the actual projects do receive a tax credit. Almost all energy is subsidized.
So I was wondering, you're focusing on solar. Do you think it's important that we also use wind energy, geothermal at the same time, or shall we really just focus on solar panels?
Well, I'm very much an all of the above person. So, I like the phrase clean energy because we're talking about solar, we're talking about energy storage. Wind is very site specific. So wind is available as an offshore resource. For example, in the state of Georgia, there is an adequate offshore resource, but it's very expensive to build those towers. There's a lot happening in Virginia right now. Virginia is doing a massive energy project for wind energy. They're doing solar as well. They're moving to their goal of 100% clean energy. Geothermal for heating and cooling is a very smart thing for an individual home or building or group of buildings. So energy efficiency is very powerful. I mean, I'm definitely, all of the above and any technology that works together. Really, when you get them all working together, that's really when you have the most effective projects. I mean, building to net zero or near net zero with good design, good installation, good daylighting, so you're not using a lot of energy, and then powering that energy that you have as much as possible with solar energy on site, using energy storage like Tesla Powerwalls and Sonnen. That's when it all comes together, is when you're bringing those technologies together.
So Matthew asks, for someone looking to move into a career in solar and alternative energies, what are some functional skills that would be in demand for different career paths?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think you want to know as much about the industry as possible, and that, doing work in the field is really a great way to learn. There's a program called NABCEP, a North American Board Certified Energy Practitioner Program. There's some very good intro classes that can be done online. There's some good instructors here in Georgia. There's some great national training out of Colorado that I recommend often. But really understanding all of the fundamentals, understanding what solar inverters are about, what racking is all about, what monitoring is all about, what operations and maintenance is all about. I think the more you understand the whole ecosystem, the more you're able to better solve problems, to build better projects, to think about the impact and siting. I mean, to me, the more you know, the more effective you're going to be as a practitioner. And I think getting involved in the industry and the associations too. So being a member of the Georgia Solar Energy Association, the Georgia SEIA, which is the Solar Energy Industry Association, those organizations have an important role participating, and you can't start early enough. I think if you do see a career in that, you've got a year and a half to graduation, there are things that you can start doing now, to me, that will better prepare you, for that graduation and that entry into the industry.
So you were in business school and then moved on to do a lot of technology issues in the company. I wonder, what was your motive going into the business school? Did you already know that you wanted to work in this kind of field? Can you tell us a little bit about your personal path?
What my career path was, I knew I wanted to be in business, and I loved marketing. I still love marketing. I describe myself as a technology marketer, and I wanted to go in the computer business. I found computers fascinating. I then found software was really my niche. I love hardware too, but I'm more of a software guy. So when I graduated from Georgia Southern, I helped open one of the first computer stores called Computerland. And so I learned from the ground up, building computers, training people on computers, teaching them the basics of computers was really what I did. And then went in the software business with Lotus Development, which was one of the most innovative companies ever. And I was able to participate in a lot of different roles. We rolled out satellite-based data systems for financial information. We created lots of new technologies. And I just find that really, really fun. I like doing the new thing. But for me, solar was an old interest. I wrote a term paper in high school about solar energy. And once you study it, people that study it typically come away with the same conclusions, whether they're a general in the Pentagon or a retired homeowner. A clean, free, abundant fuel source is a pretty good idea. And that once you see that paradigm and you understand it, you want to learn more about it. And, I wish people knew more about energy, but for whatever reason, we have a willful ignorance in our country, and a lot of people don't know where their energy comes from or how it interacts. I find it interesting, and, that's what drew me to it. The current solar industry is a lot like the early personal computer business. It's changing very rapidly. It's very dynamic. Prices are dropping drastically. Those were all things I had seen in another chapter of my career in personal computing.
So what do you think is the most important policy to be done at the state level and at the national level at this point to move towards more renewable energy?
Well, at the state level, I'd like to see more support for distributed generation. I'd like to see, solar on more homes and businesses and schools, and, finding a win-win way to do that with our utilities. I'm not anti-utility, I'm pro-utility. When they have an anti-solar policy, I'm the first one in the room to stand up and say, hey, this policy is very negative for solar. And I think if you looked at it a little differently, you might see that it doesn't have negatives for your business, that we can create win-win policies on a state level. In Georgia right now, the city of Atlanta, Athens, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, are all cities with a goal of 100% clean energy. So people want clean energy, and it's incumbent upon our monopoly utilities to respond to that, and let's work together on it. On a federal level, I would like to see the current tax credit turned into a grant so that we can do this more rapidly. I'd like to see us, recommit to the Paris Accords. I'd like to do essentially what Vice President Biden is promoting in his current plan.
Okay, are there any more questions? We have, yes, okay, there's one more question. As a total academic person right now and with an interest to move towards energy sustainability related career, what would be the suitable courses or any certificate program? Do you think I can take any particular MBA program, Emory, or maybe at Georgia Tech, or any short, like 3-4 month training courses?
Well, I think all of the above. I mean, I think there's a lot that can be learned online. I gave you some really good starter resources. I've taken classes by a gentleman up in North Georgia, Kelly Provence, does some solar classes. His company is called Solaire Gen. Saul Haroon has done some solar classes out of Georgia Tech. I've attended both over the years as continuing education. There's the Solar International out of Colorado. They have some of the top training. And then you kind of go into the area you want to go in. So if you're you want a legal person, there's a role for legal. If you're a finance guy or person, you can go into finance. If you're interested in solar photography, I mean, there are so many disciplines within the solar industry that, your skills can probably find a home.
Great. Are there any more questions that you would like to ask? If so, please write on the chat. If not, again, thank you so much. It was so great to know about from the global perspective to the national and the local perspective. And I really hope that we will get more renewable energy in Georgia and also moving forward in the US. So thank you again.
It was really fun. Thank you for your questions. If people have other questions, I love to try to help people move in this industry. Come on in, the water's fine. It isn't easy. This is not an easy thing we're doing, but it's very rewarding, and I believe in the work that we're doing. And once again, the call to action is get involved, do something, join a project, volunteer, join a campaign. There's so many things to do right now, and be safe. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe can you share the information about the Biden meeting again for somebody that might have missed, if you have it handy there?
The simplest thing to do is go to cleanenergyforbiden.com, and there's a sign up, and that will route your information to the Georgia group, and we'll include you in our email blast. Everything we're doing is virtual right now, as you might expect, but to me that's a great thing to get involved, to find out about it, to share the importance. We don't want to wake up on November 4th and go, gosh, we got the wrong outcome and I didn't do what I could do. I want to stand up and be counted.
So I put that information on the chat message, and then you can see the events information there that James was talking about as well on the events tab, correct?
Yes.
Great. Okay, with that, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you stay safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.